What happens when a waitress, drowning in debt and invisible to the world, comes face to face with a billionaire's fury? We're not talking about a simple complaint. We're talking about a storm of power and rage so intense it silences a 5-star London restaurant. He's a man who can buy and sell entire city blocks, and he's about to ruin lives over a single mistake. He's already on his feet, his bodyguards moving in the end of a career for the terrified manager. But then the waitress does something impossible. She speaks 4 words. 4 words in a language no one expects, in a dialect so specific and personal, it stops the billionaire dead in his tracks. This isn't a story about good service. It's about a secret that connects 2 worlds and a single sentence that changes everything. The air in the Gilded Lyre. A bastion of old money and new power nestled in the heart of Mayfair, was usually thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet confidence. Tonight, however, it was sharp with the metallic tang of fear. The source of this disturbance was a man at table 7, the most coveted alcove in the restaurant, a man whose presence usually guaranteed a level of hushed reverence, usually reserved for royalty. Khalid al-Jamil was not a king, but he was close. A Saudi construction and technology magnate, his net worth was a matter of public speculation and private awe. His face, usually a stoic mask of handsome, sun-weathered features, was currently a thundercloud of raw fury. His dark eyes, which had appraised multi-billion-dollar energy contracts with unnerving calm just that morning, were now fixed on the trembling restaurant manager, Mr. Davies. Incompetence. Khalid's voice was low, yet it cut through the muted clinking of cutlery across the entire dining room. It was a voice accustomed to absolute obedience, a voice that didn't need to be raised to command a legion. I do not tolerate incompetence. Not in my boardroom, and certainly not when I am paying a small fortune for a piece of fish. The offending item lay on a pristine white plate, a Dover sole filleted tableside. The supposed error, a minuscule bone no larger than an eyelash, had been spotted by one of his 2 ever-present aides. For anyone else, it would be an oversight. For Khalid al-Jamil, on this particular day, it was a profound insult. It was the final crack in a dam that had been straining to hold back a flood of frustration all week. A colossal green energy deal, the legacy project of his career, had just imploded that afternoon, due to a betrayal he was still struggling to process. The bone was not the reason for his anger. It was merely the target. Mr. Davies, a man who had placated ambassadors and Hollywood stars, was visibly sweating. Mr. al-Jamil, I am profoundly sorry. It is an inexcusable lapse. Please allow us to remake the entire meal for you and your party. Of course, there will be no charge. No charge. Khalid let out a short, incredulous laugh that was devoid of any humor. Do you think this is about money? Do you have any idea who I am? He pushed his chair back, the sound scraping harshly against the marble floor. The entire restaurant flinched. His 2 bodyguards, monolithic men in tailored suits, moved with fluid precision, one stepping toward the door, the other placing a hand discreetly on the small of his boss's back. This is about standards, about a promise of perfection that you have failed to keep. We are leaving. Panic flashed in Mr. Davies's eyes. A walkout by Khalid al-Jamil wasn't just a bad review. It was a black mark on the ledger of London's elite. It was a story that would be whispered from Knightsbridge to Kensington. It was in this supercharged moment that Chloe Sterling moved. A waitress, not the head waiter, not the sommelier, not the manager, but a simple waitress who was meant to be invisible. 26 years old, with eyes that held a quiet weariness and a grace that came from balancing countless plates and expectations she had been serving the adjacent table. She had heard every word, felt every tremor of the billionaire's rage. She was supposed to clear her table, keep her head down, and let the manager handle the explosion. It was the smart thing to do. The safe thing to do. She had rent to pay and a life that couldn't afford a single ripple, let alone a tsunami like Khalid al-Jamil. But she had also seen something else. Beneath the volcanic anger, she saw a flicker of profound pain in his eyes. It was a look she recognized. It was the look of a man who wasn't just angry at the world, but wounded by it. She had lived in Riyadh for 10 years as a child, her father an engineer on a major urban development project. She hadn't just learned the language. She had absorbed the culture, the nuances, the proverbs, and the deep-seated importance of honor and respect. As Khalid turned to leave his formidable back to the room, Chloe took a small, steadying breath. She stepped forward past the petrified Mr. Davies. Her colleagues stared winged-eyed, certain she was about to be fired in the most spectacular fashion. She did not address his anger about the fish. She did not apologize for the restaurant. She spoke softly, her voice clear and steady in the suffocating silence. She spoke in an Arabic that was not the formal classical language of news anchors, but the warm, nuanced cadence of the Najd region, the very heartland of Saudi Arabia, where his family was from. Al-Karam fil wajh ya Sheikh, she said. Generosity is written on the face, O Sheikh. It was a simple poetic proverb, a phrase one's grandmother might say. It was intimate, respectful, and utterly, shockingly unexpected. Khalid al-Jamil froze. His entire body went rigid. His hand, which had been gesturing dismissively, stopped mid-air. He didn't turn around immediately. It was as if the words, spoken in a flawless, familiar accent, by a voice he had never heard, had erected an invisible wall in front of him. The sound of a London waitress speaking his mother tongue was improbable. The sound of her speaking it, with the accent of his childhood home, was impossible. His bodyguard looked at him confused. Mr. Davies stared at Chloe as if she had just sprouted wings. The entire restaurant held its breath. Slowly, deliberately, as if resisting a magnetic pull, Khalid al-Jamil turned around. His furious mask was gone. In its place was a look of profound, absolute astonishment. His dark eyes locked onto Chloe's, and for the first time that night, the billionaire looked utterly and completely silenced. The silence that followed Chloe's words was heavier than the fury that preceded it. Time seemed to warp in the gilded lyre. For Chloe, it felt like an eternity as the full weight of Khalid al-Jamil's gaze settled upon her. It was an intense, analytical stare, as if he were trying to deconstruct a complex equation. The anger had receded from his eyes, replaced by a piercing curiosity that was in its own way just as intimidating. "Repeat what you said," he commanded. His voice had lost its harsh edge, but it now carried the immense gravity of his full attention. Chloe's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. The rational part of her brain was screaming, "What have you done? You've overstepped. You've insulted him. You're fired." But the part of her that remembered dusty afternoons in Riyadh, the kindness of her childhood neighbors, and the deep respect for elders ingrained in her, held her steady. She met his gaze directly, a feat Mr. Davies had failed to accomplish all evening. "I said," she repeated her Arabic, just as fluid and natural as before, "Al-Karam fil wajh ya Sheikh. Forgive me if I was improper. I only meant that the frustration I saw did not match the face of the man I was looking at. It was a masterful deflection, respectful and yet deeply personal. She wasn't just translating the proverb. She was explaining her intent, showing that she understood not just the words, but the cultural soul behind them. Khalid's aide, a younger man named Faisal, who had been silent until now, took a half step forward, his expression a mixture of shock and concern. "Sir," Khalid raised a single commanding hand, silencing him without a glance. He took a step closer to Chloe, ignoring the manager who now seemed to have shrunk into the plush carpeting. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" he asked, his English returning, but now laced with a quiet intensity. "Not from a book, not from a university course in London." "I grew up in Riyadh, sir," Chloe answered simply. "My father was an engineer with Bechtel working on the Kingdom Centre project. We lived there for 10 years. The mention of the iconic Riyadh skyscraper, a project he knew intimately, was another small shock. He was no longer looking at a waitress. He was looking at a ghost from a past and a place he thought he had left behind in London. He saw a young Englishwoman in a black uniform, but he heard the echo of home. The carefully constructed walls he maintained between his business life in the West and his roots in the East had been unexpectedly breached. He studied her for another long moment. He saw the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. She wasn't fawning or intimidated. She was simply present. In a world of sycophants and yes-men, her quiet, direct dignity was as startling as her accent. He made a decision. It was swift, unconventional, and entirely characteristic of the man who built his empire on gut feelings. He turned to the still-frozen Mr. Davies. "The fish is forgotten, but my evening is ruined. I will not be staying." He then looked at his entourage. "Faisal, you and the security team wait for me in the car. I wish to speak with this young lady. Alone." Faisal's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. An order like that was unheard of. Khalid al-Jamil did not have private, unscheduled meetings with waitstaff. "Sir, is that wise?" "It is what I have decided." Khalid stated the finality in his tone, leaving no room for argument. His team, ever professional, melted away. The bodyguards were the last to leave, their eyes lingering on Chloe for a second too long, as if trying to assess a threat they couldn't comprehend. Soon the alcove at table 7 was occupied by only 2 people, the billionaire magnate and the waitress who had dared to speak to him. The rest of the restaurant staff, under a sharp glare from Mr. Davies, began to cautiously resume their duties, though the air of normalcy was a fragile facade. Khalid gestured to the chair opposite his. "Please, sit." Chloe hesitated. "Sir, I'm on duty." "You are not," he said, his voice leaving no room for debate. "For the next 10 minutes, you are my guest." With a feeling of unreality, Chloe sat down at the table she had only ever approached to serve. She smoothed her apron, her hands trembling slightly. "Your name?" he asked. "Chloe. Chloe Sterling." "Chloe Sterling," he repeated, tasting the name. "And you lived in my country. You understand our ways." "I believe so, sir. I was young, but I remember it fondly. The people were very kind to my family." He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "Today I was dealt a heavy blow, a betrayal in business of the worst kind, by a man I trusted, an Englishman, as it happens." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "My entire legacy project, a solar energy initiative that would power a new city, is in jeopardy. I came here tonight to quiet the noise in my head. Instead, I found more incompetence, more disappointment." Chloe listened, her heart aching with a surprising pang of empathy for this incredibly powerful yet clearly wounded man. She said nothing, sensing that he didn't want platitudes. He wanted to be heard. "What you did," he continued, "was either incredibly foolish or incredibly brave. You saw a storm, and you walked directly into it." "Why?" Chloe thought for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because the storm wasn't about the fish, sir, and the proverbs I learned as a child. They are about looking past the storm to see the man. I apologize if I presumed too much." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Khalid's lips for the first time. It transformed his severe face, hinting at a warmth buried deep beneath the surface. "You presumed correctly," he said. He sat back, a new idea taking root in his mind, an idea born of desperation and instinct. The man who had betrayed him, his longtime British consultant, had used a deep understanding of Western corporate culture to manipulate the deal, weaving a web of legal and financial complexities that Khalid's own team had failed to anticipate. He had been outmaneuvered not by numbers, but by nuance. Perhaps he thought the solution was to fight fire with fire. He needed a bridge, not just a translator, but someone who understood both worlds from the inside out. Someone who could see what his own people, blinded by their perspective, could not. "Miss Sterling," he began, his tone shifting from personal to professional with breathtaking speed. "This job you have, waiting tables, is it your passion, your life's ambition?" Chloe was taken aback by the question. "No, sir. It pays the bills. I was studying art history, but I had to stop. Family reasons." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Family reasons was a polite euphemism for her father's financial ruin and subsequent disappearance from her life. "I see." Khalid's eyes held a sudden sharp glint of opportunity. "I find myself in need of a consultant, someone with a unique skill set, a fluency not just in language but in culture, both of ours. The work would be demanding. The stakes are higher than you can imagine. But the compensation would ensure you never have to wait another table in your life." Chloe stared at him, her mind struggling to keep up. Was he offering her a job? A man she'd met 10 minutes ago, a man she had provoked in the middle of a tantrum. It sounded insane. "Sir, I don't understand. What would I be doing?" "You would be listening," Khalid said, standing up. "You would be observing, and you would be telling me what I am missing. You would be my bridge." He pulled a sleek black business card from his jacket. It was heavy, the lettering embossed in simple, elegant silver. "My assistant Faisal will be in contact to arrange a proper meeting. Be at the address on this card tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock sharp." He placed the card on the table between them. It lay there, a stark rectangle of black against the white linen, representing an impossible choice. "I do not make offers twice, Miss Sterling," he said, his voice once again the cool, commanding tone of a CEO. "I hope for your sake you are as brave as you appeared to be a few minutes ago." And with that, Khalid Al-Jamil turned and walked out of the Gilded Lyre, leaving Chloe Sterling sitting alone at his table. The entire restaurant watching her, and a single business card holding the weight of a future she could never have imagined. The address on the business card wasn't an office building. It was for the Corinthia Hotel, and the card specified the Royal Penthouse. Chloe stood before the grand entrance the next morning, feeling as though she were from another planet. Her best black trousers and a simple white blouse, which had felt professional and smart in her small flat in Clapham, now seemed woefully inadequate. The doorman, draped in a magnificent uniform, eyed her with polite suspicion until she uttered the name Al-Jamil. The effect was instantaneous. His posture straightened, and he ushered her inside with a deferential, "Of course, miss. Right this way." She was escorted to a private elevator that whisked her silently to the top floor. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer. The space was breathtaking, a 2-story cavern of glass, marble, and steel, with a panoramic view that stretched from the London Eye to the BT Tower. The city lay sprawled below them like a detailed map. Faisal Khalid's aide from the restaurant greeted her. Dressed in a razor-sharp suit, he was polite but formal, his eyes giving nothing away. "Miss Sterling, thank you for coming. Mr. Al-Jamil will be with you shortly. Can I offer you some coffee?" "Water." "Water would be lovely, thank you," Chloe said, her voice steadier than she felt. As Faisal attended to the drink, she walked towards the immense floor-to-ceiling windows. London looked so quiet from up here, the frantic energy of its streets reduced to a silent, flowing river of red buses and black cabs. It was a perspective of power, a vantage point from which the world and its problems seemed small and manageable. "It is a beautiful city, but it can also be treacherous." Khalid's voice came from behind her. He had entered so silently she hadn't noticed. He wasn't in a suit, but in a simple yet clearly expensive white linen shirt and dark trousers. He looked rested, the fury of the previous night completely gone, replaced by a calm, focused energy. "It all depends on your vantage point, I suppose," Chloe replied, turning to face him. "Precisely," he said, gesturing for her to sit on one of the plush white sofas. "From down there on the street, one must watch for every threat. The speeding car, the thief, the rival. From up here, one can see everything coming. That is what I am offering you, Miss Sterling. A new vantage point." He sat opposite her, as Faisal placed a crystal glass of water on the table. With a nod from his boss, the aide retreated to a discreet distance, leaving them to their conversation. "I will be direct," Khalid began. "The project I mentioned is called the Asyad Project. It is the cornerstone of my country's future energy plans, a network of solar farms in the Rub al-Khali Desert, powering a new smart city. It is my legacy. My partner in this venture was a British consulting firm, Sterling Cross Capital, led by a man named Robert Sterling. I trusted him for 10 years. He advised my company, Al-Jamil Enterprises, on all our Western investments." Chloe's blood ran cold. Sterling. The name hit her like a physical blow. It couldn't be. It was a common name. A coincidence. Her mind raced desperately, trying to dismiss the connection. Her father's name was Robert Sterling. He was a consultant, an engineer turned financier who had worked on international projects. But he had lost everything years ago. He had vanished from her life after a bitter falling out, leaving her and her mother to pick up the pieces. It couldn't be him. She forced herself to remain calm, to keep her expression neutral. "What happened?" she asked, her voice a little too tight. "He used my trust against me," Khalid said, his voice laced with cold fury. "He structured the contracts in such a way that at the last minute he could leverage a series of legal loopholes and environmental clauses he himself recommended we include to stall the project indefinitely. He then used that leverage to attempt a hostile takeover of the entire technology patent portfolio associated with the project. He didn't just want a bigger piece of the pie. He wanted to steal the entire bakery." Khalid stood up and paced in front of the window. "My lawyers are good, the best in Riyadh, but they think like Saudis. They do not understand the subtle poison of British corporate law. The old boys' network, the unspoken rules of the game here. Sterling played me perfectly. He used our culture's emphasis on a man's word and honor against me, all while hiding behind a mountain of Western legal jargon. He stopped and turned to face her. That is where you come in. I don't need another lawyer. I need a new perspective. I want to hire you, Miss Sterling. Your official title will be Special Consultant for Cross-Cultural Strategy. You will have access to all the project documents. You will sit in on my meetings with my legal team. Your job is to read, listen, and tell me what they are not seeing. You grew up in my world, but you were born in his. You are the bridge. You can translate not just the language, but the intent. The offer was staggering. The implications were terrifying. If this Robert Sterling was indeed her father, she would be hired to help destroy him. If he wasn't, it was just an unnerving coincidence. But her gut screamed at her. The ambition, the ruthlessness. It sounded exactly like the man she remembered. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Based on a proverb and 10 minutes in a restaurant. "Do not underestimate those 10 minutes, Khalid said firmly. In those 10 minutes you showed more perception and courage than my entire executive team has shown in the last month. You were not afraid of my anger. You saw the root of the problem. That is a rare skill. I am a man who has built an empire on trusting my instincts, and my instincts tell me you are the key." He named a salary that made Chloe's head spin. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning in a decade, let alone a year. It was enough to pay off her student loans, find a new apartment, and live without the constant grinding fear of financial ruin. It was freedom. But what would it cost her? I need to read the initial contract. She found herself saying the words coming out before she could stop them. "And the profile of the man who betrayed you, Robert Sterling." A flicker of respect showed in Khalid's eyes. She wasn't simply dazzled by the money. "Of course. Faisal will provide you with a preliminary file and a non-disclosure agreement. You can review it here. Take all the time you need." He motioned to his aide. Faisal approached with a tablet and a slim leather-bound folder. He placed them on the table in front of Chloe. "The NDA is standard," Faisal said coolly. "What you read in this file is not to leave this room, whether you accept the position or not." Chloe nodded, her hands clammy. She signed the document with a pen that felt heavier than a brick. Then, with a deep, trembling breath, she opened the tablet. The first document was a corporate profile of Sterling Cross Capital, and there on the screen was a professional headshot. Her world tilted on its axis. The face was older, the dark hair now streaked with grey at the temples, the lines around the eyes deeper. But it was him. It was unmistakably her father, Robert Sterling. The same confident, calculating smile that had always seemed to hide more than it revealed. The man who had promised her the world and then disappeared when his own came crashing down. He hadn't lost everything. He had reinvented himself. He had risen higher than ever before. And in his ascent, he had tried to ruin Khalid al-Jamil. Chloe felt a wave of nausea. She looked up from the screen, her eyes wide with a secret terror, and met Khalid's intense, expectant gaze. He was offering her a golden key to a new life. But to use it, she would have to help him lock the door on her own father's world, and she had no idea what monsters lay on either side. For a long moment, Chloe couldn't breathe. The air in the penthouse, once filled with the promise of opportunity, now felt thin and suffocating. The face on the screen was a spectre from a life she had tried to bury. Her father, the man whose absence had been a defining feature of her young adulthood. The man whose last words to her during a bitter phone call after he lost their family home were, "You have to be a predator in this world, Chloe, or you become prey. I just chose the wrong hunt." It seemed he had found a new one. "Is something wrong, Miss Sterling?" Khalid's voice cut through her paralysis. He had noticed the change in her, the sudden pallor of her skin, the way her hand trembled slightly as it rested on the tablet. Chloe's mind raced a chaotic whirlwind of panic and preservation. Tell him right now. He's my father." "I can't do this." The words formed in her throat, but died before they could escape. What would he do? Would he throw her out, disgusted by the association? Would he suspect her of being a spy, of being in league with her father? The life-altering opportunity would vanish, and she would be left with nothing but a dangerous secret. Another voice, colder and more calculating, a voice that sounded disturbingly like her father's, whispered a different path. "Say nothing. You owe him nothing. He abandoned you. This man Khalid is offering you a way out. Use it. Use what you know." She forced her expression into a mask of professional focus, a skill she'd honed over years of dealing with difficult customers. "No, sir. Nothing is wrong." She lied, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. "I'm just absorbing the scale of the betrayal. It's audacious." Khalid nodded, accepting her explanation. "Audacious is one word for it. Now you see why I need a different kind of weapon in this war." "I accept your offer," Chloe said, the decision solidifying even as it terrified her. She was stepping off a cliff, not knowing if she would fly or fall. A look of satisfaction settled on Khalid's features. "Excellent. Faisal will handle the formalities of your contract and accommodations. You will have a suite here at the hotel. You start immediately. I want you to read everything. Every email, every contract, every addendum. I want you to live inside this project until you know it better than I do." The next few days were a blur. Chloe was plunged into the heart of Al Jamil Enterprises' London operation. Her life in the cramped Clapham flat became a distant memory, replaced by the opulent, sterile silence of her hotel suite. Days were spent in a glass-walled conference room, surrounded by Khalid's legal team, a group of sharp, serious men who initially viewed her with thinly veiled skepticism. She was the Waitress consultant, an eccentric whim of their boss. Chloe said little in those first meetings. She listened. She absorbed the complex language of international finance and contract law, and she read. She devoured thousands of pages of documents, her past study of art history, the discipline of finding meaning in details, of understanding context and provenance, giving her a unique lens. But she wasn't just reading legal text. She was reading her father. In the precise, predatory wording of the clauses he had drafted, she recognized his voice. She saw his ambition, his meticulous planning, his utter ruthlessness. He had always been a brilliant strategist, a grand master of chess who saw people as pieces on a board. She remembered him teaching her the game as a child, his constant refrain being, "Think 10 moves ahead. Chloe, always control the center." In these contracts, she could see him controlling the center, laying traps months, even years in advance. She began to see the patterns his Saudi legal team had missed, not because they weren't smart, but because they didn't know the man. They saw a business adversary. Chloe saw a ghost. One evening, buried under a mountain of files in her suite, she found it. It was a sub-clause in an environmental impact assessment report attached to an appendix that was hundreds of pages long. It seemed innocuous, It stipulated that any discovery of potential archaeological significance on the proposed construction site would trigger an immediate and indefinite project halt, pending a full investigation by a UNESCO-affiliated panel. Khalid's team had dismissed it as standard boilerplate. But Chloe knew her father. He was not a man who cared for history or archaeology. He only cared for leverage. She cross-referenced the coordinates of the proposed solar farm site with geological and historical survey maps. It took hours, but she found what she was looking for, a series of old academic papers speculating about the location of a lost city of the Ubar civilization, the so-called Atlantis of the Sands. The speculated location was right on the edge of Khalid's proposed site. It was a long shot, a fringe theory, but it was enough. Her father hadn't just relied on legal loopholes. He had planted a cultural bomb, a trigger that would mire the project in an international heritage dispute, a public relations nightmare that the Saudi government would be desperate to avoid. He would use the delay to bleed Khalid dry and seize the patents. It was brilliant, it was diabolical, and it was pure Robert Sterling. At that moment, she felt a profound sense of cold clarity. She was not helping a stranger against another stranger. She was caught in a war between two titans, one of whom was her own flesh and blood. And she was the only person in the world who understood the enemy's strategy. The next morning, she walked into the conference room and interrupted the lead counsel mid-sentence. "You're looking in the wrong place," she said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the legal jargon. All eyes turned to her. The skepticism was still there, but now it was mixed with curiosity. She walked to the head of the table where Khalid was sitting, his face an impassive mask. She placed the archaeological survey map next to the environmental impact report. "Mr. Al-Jamil," she began, "your problem isn't in the financial contracts. It's buried in the sand." She proceeded to lay out her discovery, connecting the obscure clause to the academic theories explaining the cultural and political leverage it would give her father. She spoke of his methods, his way of thinking, not revealing how she knew, but presenting it as a logical analysis. "This man doesn't fight on one front," she explained. "He creates a multi-front war. He attacks your finances, your legal standing, and your reputation all at once. You've been focused on the legal and financial battle, but the reputational attack is the one he will use to deliver the killing blow." As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room changed. The lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. Faisal stared at her, his professional reserve finally cracking to reveal a look of sheer astonishment. Khalid remained silent, his eyes fixed on her, listening to every word. When she finished, a long silence hung in the air. He finally looked away from her and at his lead counsel. "Did any of you see this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The lawyer, a proud and decorated man, could only stammer, "No, sir. We considered it a negligible risk." "A negligible risk," Khalid repeated flatly. He turned his gaze back to Chloe, and for the first time she saw something more than curiosity in his eyes. It was a deep, profound respect. "You have just saved us months of time and millions of dollars, Miss Sterling." He stood up. "The old strategy is dead. From now on, we follow a new one. We will listen to Miss Sterling." In that moment, Chloe was no longer the Waitress consultant. She was the lead strategist in a multi-billion-dollar corporate war. And her primary weapon was the intimate, painful knowledge of the man she was trying to destroy, her own father. The balance of power in Khalid al-Jamil's inner circle shifted overnight. Chloe was no longer a peripheral figure. She was at the epicenter. Khalid moved her from the conference room to his private office in the penthouse where they worked side by side, often late into the night, poring over maps, financial projections, and psychological profiles of the key players at Stirling Cross Capital. It was a strange, intense intimacy. Chloe learned the rhythms of his day, the strong, unsweetened coffee he drank at dawn, the way he would fall silent and stare out at the city, when deep in thought the faint scent of oud that clung to his clothes. He in turn began to rely on her for more than just strategy. He started to ask for her opinion on other matters, valuing her clear, unvarnished perspective. He opened up to her in small, unguarded moments. He spoke of his late wife, Layla, who had died years ago. He described her as the anchor of his life, and confessed that since her passing, his work had become a fortress to keep the grief at bay. He spoke of his vision for the Asiad project, not as a source of profit, but as a promise to her a way to build a better future. She believed that power was a responsibility, not a privilege, he told Chloe one evening, as they watched the city lights ignite below them. She would have despised a man like Robert Stirling, who uses his brilliance only to acquire, never to build. Every word was a small dagger in Chloe's heart. The guilt was a constant, heavy cloak. She was earning this man's trust, his respect, even his friendship, all while harboring a monumental secret. She was using the memories of her childhood, the games of chess, the overheard conversations, the understanding of her father's psychology as weapons in this corporate war. Her insights were devastatingly effective. My father, I mean Stirling. She corrected herself quickly, her heart skipping a beat. Is a narcissist. He needs to be the smartest man in the room. He will have planned for you to fight back legally. He wants that. It's a battle he knows how to win. What he won't expect is for you to ignore him. Ignore him? Khalid asked, intrigued. He is holding my legacy hostage. Don't fight him on the UNESCO clause, Chloe advised. Embrace it. Announce publicly that in light of potential archaeological sensitivities identified by your own due diligence, your diligence not his, you are proactively funding a state-of-the-art archaeological survey of the region. Frame it as Al-Jamil Enterprises being a custodian of national heritage. You'll be praised for it. You'll take his weapon and turn it into a shield. He can't use a threat that you've already neutralized and turned into good publicity. Khalid was stunned by the audacity of the plan. It was counterintuitive, expensive, and brilliant. He put the plan into motion. The press release was picked up by international news agencies. Khalid was lauded for his corporate responsibility. In a single move, Robert Stirling's hidden leverage was rendered useless. Chloe's next insight was even more personal. He surrounds himself with people who are competent, but not as smart as he is. His second in command, a man named David Chen. My father would have cultivated a sense of dependency in him. Chen is likely the one doing the real work, but Stirling takes the credit. If you put enough pressure on the company, Stirling will sacrifice Chen to save himself. Acting on this, Khalid's legal team initiated a targeted legal action aimed directly at the division. Chen managed citing specific contractual irregularities Chloe had identified. The pressure was immense. As Chloe predicted, Stirling Cross Capital began to show cracks. Robert Stirling was being outmaneuvered, and he couldn't understand how. Khalid Al-Jamil, who he had seen as a straightforward, if powerful foreign businessman, was suddenly playing corporate chess with the skill of a grandmaster. The moves were subtle, creative, and seemed to anticipate his own strategy before he even enacted it. He felt like he was fighting a shadow, someone who knew his playbook page by page. He grew paranoid, suspicious of everyone on his team. For Chloe, the success was terrifying. She lived on a razor's edge. A single slip of the tongue referring to Sterling as my father, revealing a detail she couldn't possibly know from the documents alone, would bring everything crashing down. The stress was immense. She had nightmares of Khalid's warm respect, turning to cold fury. The same fury she had witnessed in the restaurant, but this time directed at her. One afternoon, Khalid found her staring blankly at a spreadsheet, her face pale and drawn. "You are carrying a heavy burden, Chloe," he said gently, his voice startling her. He had started using her first name in their private meetings. "The work is demanding," she deflected. "It is more than that," he insisted, his dark eyes searching her face. "I have asked you to walk into the mind of a very dark man. It is taking its toll. Perhaps we should take a break this evening. There is a private concert at the Barbican Center. A friend of mine is conducting. It would be good for you to see something beautiful after staring at so much ugliness." The offer was personal, a clear line being crossed from a purely professional relationship. Part of her, the lonely young woman who hadn't had a real friend in years, desperately wanted to accept. But the other part, the part that housed her terrible secret, screamed that it was a mistake. Getting closer to Khalid only made her deception more profound, more painful. "I can't," she said more abruptly than she intended. "I need to finish reviewing these investment portfolios." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but he masked it quickly. "As you wish. Do not work too late." He left the office and Chloe buried her face in her hands. The isolation was crushing her. She was succeeding beyond her wildest dreams, but she was utterly terrifyingly alone, trapped between a past she couldn't escape and a future built on a lie. She was winning a war for a man she admired by betraying the blood of a man she despised, and she was starting to lose herself in the process. The razor's edge was cutting deeper every day. Robert Sterling was a man cornered, and cornered men are dangerous. His meticulously planned corporate assault on Khalid al-Jamil was not just failing. It was being systematically dismantled with an unnerving prescience. Every strategy was anticipated, every trap disarmed. It felt as if his opponent could read his mind, and the sensation was maddening. Consumed by a gnawing paranoia, he did what he always did when threatened. He gathered intelligence. He hired a discreet private investigator, tasking him with one simple objective: identify the brain behind al-Jamil's new strategy. The report that landed on his desk was thin, but its contents were explosive. It contained surveillance photos of Khalid's inner circle, and one face stood out. It was a young woman, identified as a new consultant named Chloe Sterling, whose previous job was listed as a waitress. Robert stared at the grainy photo of his daughter's face, and the world tilted on its axis. Chloe. It was impossible. He hadn't seen her in 3 years, not since his own financial ruin had shattered their family. And now she was here, allied with his enemy, the architect of his downfall. The betrayal felt absolute, a dagger forged from his own blood. He didn't wait. 2 evenings later, as Chloe stepped out of the Corinthia Hotel for a breath of crisp night air, a black sedan slid silently to the curb. The tinted rear window glided down, revealing the face she hadn't seen outside of her nightmares. "Get in the car, Chloe," Robert Sterling said. His voice was unnaturally calm, which made it all the more menacing. She froze, her heart seizing in her chest. "I have nothing to say to you." She turned to retreat into the safety of the hotel. "If you walk away," he called after her, his voice rising slightly, "I will have this conversation in the hotel lobby. I am certain, Mr. Al-Jamil would be fascinated to learn the true identity of his brilliant new consultant. It was a perfect trap. He had always known how to corner her. Defeated, she opened the car door and slid inside. The opulent leather interior felt suffocating, filled with the scent of his cologne and years of unspoken resentment. The car pulled silently into the stream of London traffic. "How could you?" He began, his voice a low hiss of fury. "My own daughter, conspiring with him against me. Tell me, what was the price for your loyalty? How much did he pay you to forget your own name?" A surge of long-suppressed anger burned away her fear. "You want to talk about loyalty?" She shot back, her voice trembling but strong. "You who vanished when your own risks blew up in your face, you who left us to pick up the pieces of the life you broke, you don't get to use the words family or loyalty with me. You surrendered that right years ago." The truth of her words hit him, but he deflected his tactics, shifting instantly from aggression to manipulation. The anger in his face was replaced by a mask of paternal concern she knew all too well. He reached across the seat and placed a hand on hers. She flinched. "Chloe, listen," he said, his voice now soft and persuasive. "That was a mistake, and I've paid for it. But this is our chance to get it all back. We're the same, you and I. We're survivors. This Al-Jamil is just using you for your insight. When he's done, he'll discard you. But you are my blood. We can win this together. Just tell me his next move. That's all I need. Everything I gain, half of it, will be yours. A real legacy for our family." It was the same hollow promise he had always made, a kingdom built on a foundation of sand. She looked at his desperate eyes and saw not a father, but a frightened man terrified of losing. In that moment, a profound and sorrowful clarity washed over her. The guilt and fear she had carried for weeks vanished. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled her hand from beneath his. "The difference between us," she said, her voice steady and clear, "is that you think winning is all that matters. I've learned that how you win is what defines you." She turned to the driver. "Stop the car." Robert stared at her, disbelief warring with rage. He had played his final card, and it had failed. "You're a fool," he snarled, the mask of charm gone completely. "You're choosing him over your own father." "No," Chloe replied, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. "I'm choosing myself." She opened the door and stepped out onto the pavement. She didn't look back as the black car sped away, disappearing into the river of taillights. The confrontation she had dreaded had come, and it had not broken her. It had set her free. She turned and began the walk back to the hotel, her purpose clear. The game was over. It was time to tell Khalid everything. Chloe walked back into the Corinthia, not with the fear of an employee, but with the quiet resolve of a woman who had made her choice. She found Khalid in his penthouse office, a dark silhouette against the vast glittering expanse of the London skyline. He turned as she entered, a welcoming smile on his face that quickly faded as he registered her solemn expression. "Chloe, what has happened?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "I have to tell you the truth," she began, her voice steady, despite the frantic beating of her heart. "Something I should have told you the day we met. Please just hear all of it." He gestured to a chair, his full undivided attention on her. As they sat opposite each other, the truth spilled out. "Robert Sterling is my father," she said, the words hanging in the air between them. She explained everything. The painful estrangement after his financial collapse. The shock of seeing his face in the file and the lie of omission she had maintained out of fear and a desperate desire for the opportunity he was offering. She recounted every detail of the confrontation that had just occurred, her father's manipulative plea for her to betray Khalid, and her absolute refusal. When she finished, she looked him in the eye, fully prepared for the explosion of rage she had once witnessed. Khalid remained silent for a long moment, his gaze intense and analytical. He was processing every word, re-evaluating every interaction, every brilliant insight she'd had. He wasn't seeing a deceiver, but a woman who had been walking a razor's edge, fighting a war, both for him and within herself. "You deceived me," he finally said, his voice level and devoid of emotion. Her heart sank. "You placed my entire legacy at risk by hiding this connection. By all rights, I should end your employment this instant." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "However," he continued, his tone shifting when faced with an ultimate test, a choice between blood and honor, "you chose honor. Your father came to you to betray me, and instead you have come to me to betray his secret. In doing so, you have not lost my trust. You have finally and completely earned it." A wave of relief so profound it left Chloe light-headed, washed over her. The heavy cloak of her secret had finally been lifted. "He is desperate and blind," Khalid stated, standing up, his energy now focused and formidable. "It is time to end this. Together." The final move was not a direct financial assault, but an elegant trap designed by Chloe to prey on the one vulnerability she knew her father could not control: his own ego. Instead of attacking his company, they laid a trail of sophisticated false information. The breadcrumbs leaked through trusted channels hinted at a critical weakness in Al Jamil Enterprises' financial structure, a golden opportunity for a hostile takeover, an opportunity too perfect for a narcissist like Robert to resist. Blinded by arrogance and his desperate need for a final victory, Robert Sterling took the bait. He poured all of his company's liquid capital and took on immense loans to launch his attack, believing he was about to seize the crown from a wounded king. The trap was sprung in the sterile quiet of a Mayfair boardroom at a meeting Robert himself had called to announce his triumph. Instead of a broken Khalid, he was met by Khalid Chloe and a team of forensic accountants. They calmly revealed that the weakness was a fiction and that his buyout attempt was based on manufactured premises. In the same breath, Khalid revealed his checkmate move. While Robert was busy chasing ghosts, Khalid had quietly purchased all of his company's outstanding debt. In a single brilliant stroke, Robert Sterling was ruined. He hadn't just lost the deal, he had lost everything. He was financially and professionally destroyed, a predator caught in a snare he never saw. He stared across the polished table, his face ashen first at the implacable gaze of Khalid, and then at his daughter. Chloe met his eyes not with triumph, but with a quiet, sorrowful finality. That moment marked the end of one life for Chloe, and the true beginning of another. In the months that followed, as the new director of Western strategy for Al Jamil Enterprises, she oversaw the triumphant relaunch of the Asiad project. Her relationship with Khalid had evolved into a powerful and respectful partnership, forged in crisis and solidified by trust. She was no longer the invisible waitress or the daughter of a disgraced man. She was a woman who had faced down her past, chosen her own code of honor, and built a future she had earned, not inherited. Chloe's story reminds us that the most powerful people aren't always the ones with the most money or the loudest voice. Sometimes it's the person who listens, the person who sees beyond the surface, the person who holds on to their integrity, when it would be easier to let it go. She started as a waitress, invisible to the world, but by using her unique past and her inner strength, she changed her own destiny and the future of $1 billion legacy. Her story is a testament to the fact that your circumstances don't define you. Your choices do. Even in your darkest moments, a single act of courage, a single moment of truth can change everything. If this story of courage, secrets, and redemption moved you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own hidden strength. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story about the incredible moments that change lives forever. Thank you for listening.